hopefully, once we've got that sorted, digital storytelling, brilliant. And so that's Dr. Julie Wuthnow from the University of Canterbury. So hoping that's going to start. I've got the PowerPoint up. So
got the PowerPoint up.
And so we can go.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much. Thanks, Merlin. Kia ora koutou katoa. Ko Julie, toku ingoa. Kei te mahi o e te poka pukinga ako I te whare wananga o Waitaha. So I'm learning advisor at University of Canterbury, as you can see there. I do have a lot that I'm trying to fit in here. I'm going to do my best with it. Please halt me at any point if or somebody just yell if something's unclear. This isn't exactly on the topic of online learning in the way that the two previous ones were, but it is actually a model that is absolutely hybrid. It can be online, offline, whatever. So far, my engagement with it has been entirely online. So this is a possibility for engagement with students online, and which again, I'm going to be arguing is in support of Toitū te tangata, their well-being. So digital storytelling, this is just a particular model that I've used. There's a few different ones around, but this is quite commonly used. Involves individual students supported by other students in the story circle, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Creating short videos, so 1 to 4 minutes roughly works well. In response to a story prompt. And I do want to say too, I did present an earlier version of this at the Southern Hui a couple of years ago. But there's some new stuff in here for you guys who heard that then. So let me break that apart a wee bit. So the story circle, let me say something about the prompt first. This is going to be often based on something that's happening in a class, like create a video in response to talk about a key insight that you gained in this course. I had one class recently where they were talking about, tell us a story about something significant that happened when you utilized digital technology in your course. This is for an education class that I'm going to mention shortly. So this is embedded within the course content, whoever a lecturer wants it to be. So they have a target when they're writing their story. It's not just a random story. So story circle. Like students will go off and do some work. What do they want to write about or make the movie about, I should say. Then they come back together and they get a chance to share their idea, or even better, to share a script with the other students. So they get some feedback. So, and this is facilitated to keep it all very constructive. And so it's a helpful support for them in terms of getting some confidence about what they're putting together and getting some good ideas in response to that. So ordinary devices, no need for anything fancy. This isn't about having a super flash camera and a studio and a green screen and all that kind of stuff. Not about that at all. It's like usually it'll be a laptop, but it could also be a mobile phone. Still images, which might come from the family album, or there might be, you can go online and get some images there. Using digital audio, it's good to have some music in there, and a video editor. So the digital video editor. So again, all of this can happen online. The focus here is more on story rather than making a really flash movie. It's not about high quality video production. So that's where the real focus is. So just in general, I'm a huge fan of stories, as probably not surprisingly. But let me just take a few minutes to talk about why stories are important. They're a collective activity. We share stories with others, helps us make sense of things, helps us sort of think about what things mean, create meaning in our lives, helps us build whanaungatanga and sense of belonging, because they are a collective activity. They do have a particular resonance in Aotearoa with pūrākau and lots of other indigenous storytelling traditions. And one particular writer here, pūrākau is fundamental to our sustenance and growth as soil and water are to trees. So, and I think this is it's particularly important in indigenous cultures, but I think most cultures also have some storytelling traditions that are really significant. Having said that, in the context of tertiary institutions, so universities and te pukinga these days, not all stories are equally visible or represented. This can have a big impact on students. And some stories are misrepresented or just suppressed. Now, the University of Canterbury in 20 and 2021 put together a report on equity at this university. And And what I'm going to show you next is not representative of everyone who participated. This study went on based on semi-structured interviews, and they did a survey as well. I can't quite remember the numbers of how many people they engaged, but it was in the hundreds. I should have probably written that down. There was some interesting results in there. This quote struck me fairly significantly, and this is not representative of everyone, by the way. This is possibly an outlier, but it's still part of where we live in tertiary environments. This is Aotearoa. We have a culture, we have a way of life already, and need to be respected just as much as it is important to make everyone feel welcome. So what I'm going to suggest is this is like kind of what you could call a monovocal narrative, like a really singular narrative of what is a university, who's here, what are we doing here, who's a knower, who's a learner, those kinds of things. And my suggestion is that doesn't work for every student that is there. For instance, in a survey by the Student Association in 2020, and this was a fairly small one, but again, gives an indication, 41% of students reported experiencing discrimination. And I think some of it has to do with this idea here. If you don't live in that one culture, that sense of whether you belong here or not, whether you have a legitimate voice or not, really is affected, as well as just outright poor treatment by others, by staff and other students. So when this document was delivered in August this year, it was sort of, we were guided through it by Sasha McMeeking, who's the executive director of Te Waka Pūrākau, which is the Office of Māori, Pacific and Equity. And she talked, this didn't end up in the document, but she talked about how if we want equity, if we want all students and staff as well, this wasn't just about students, this report, we really need to look at changing the deep wiring of what are we doing here? What is this environment about? And I would argue that some of that has to do with those kind of dominant narratives and the lack of some other narratives within that. So I just really like this quote. I don't like to overquote in presentations, but I just really like this one. While victors write the history, that story can be challenged by dissenting voices and unpicked until it ultimately frays at the edges. So here what I'm talking about is that, like that narrative on the previous slide, like we have a culture, we have a history, a way of living, that there's ways to kind of pick away at that. And I actually think digital storytelling is one way to do that, where we get, these are student stories. They're telling their own stories and they can start to pick away. I don't want to be overly dramatic about everything is going to be fixed by digital storytelling, but you just start to hear different voices. And that's, I think, a really important thing over a period of time. Get more voices in there. This is one vehicle to do that, because it's really quite difficult to find ways for that to happen in these really well-established institutions with deep histories and so forth. So that's one thing, because I do think the equity thing is an important part of well-being. I don't think we should underestimate that. It's not just about individuals and whether they individually feel okay or not. If you're in a situation where you feel that this place isn't for you, you don't belong here, you're not represented here, you don't see people like you there, that's really important to well-being. So now, but let's talk about individuals as well. So this digital storytelling, where people are telling their own story. Partly what they can be doing with that, and especially if they are not someone who had an assumed path to go to university. Like, of course you're going to go to university. That is for people like you. You can't not go. You must go. If you're coming from a place, and there's lots of different places, this would cover first and family and is significant, or Māori, Pacifica, adult students, ESOL students, disabled students, so forth, rainbow students, etc. There, you could make quite a long list there. Part of your job when you arrive here is like, well, who am I here? What does that mean for me to be here? And to hear your own voice is really, really quite important. And this gives an opportunity for students to do that. They also, this whole process of digital storytelling allows them to connect with other people too. And, some of us are better at small talk than others. And also, if we feel like we're an outsider somehow, that's not helpful either. But the process has that kind of group component built into it, like that story circle where people are sharing ideas. And it's about things that are important to them, that have meaning to them. That's a way for them to connect. And often if it works into a course, there will be a screening of the videos that all the students have made. that's quite a bonding thing as well. If they want to, there's no coercion involved in that, but it's a way sort of to make some important connections, and often for people for whom that's important. I'm forgetting to show you the videos, actually. I was wanting to tell you this. Let me just show you this one here. Hang on just a second. I don't know how I did that. So let me just bring this up, because that's what really makes this come to life. Hang on. Now, I'm not sure. Can you see the browser now? Possibly not. Do I need to? Oh, no. Can you see the browser okay? I can't see you guys, so I'm just going to assume that it's all good.
Yes, we can see the browser.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so here, this is about indigenous storytelling. You could take this as an example of pūrākau. Just a couple of minutes here.
Moko, do you have basketball tonight? Yes, Nanny, at 7. Oh, hey, Moko, do you have basketball tonight? Yes, Nanny, I do, at 7 p.m. Moko, do you have basketball tonight? Aye, Nanny, 7 o'clock. Moko, do you have basketball tonight? Yes, Nan, at 7. Oh, Moko, do you have basketball tonight? Yes, Nanny, I do. My name is Finley Johnson. I'm 20 years old and have a kuia with dementia. What was once a healthy, free-flowing stream is now growing weary. The streams that were once clear and blue have become murky and confused. I look at the array of golf trophies on the mantle, a relic of another time, another person, another kuia. Some awa can become plagued with whirlpools. Whirlpools that send the waka round and round, round and round, round and round. If you want to traverse these waters without becoming frustrated, believe in manaakitanga. When someone suffers from dementia, it often comes at the cost of their autonomy. So when I see my kuia trying to cook her power fritters in dishwashing liquid, I help her out in a way that doesn't leave her feeling whakamā or sad. Manaakitanga is also the little things we do that make a big difference. Stocking up the cupboards with sweets to accommodate her sweet tooth, having a puzzle for her to solve, or leaving Māori television on to keep her entertained. There's no use paddling your waka against the current. Just tautoko, be patient, accommodate, and love.
Okay, now, again, my apologies that I've got this a bit out of sequence, but this one relates to that question of identity and voice, which is sort of revealed very strongly by the title of it, Who Am I?
I grew up with an abundance of love and care, but I often wondered, who am I? Separated from my Samoan mother at 2 months, I was given to my Tongan father's parents and 2 younger sisters, and then to his older sister. From the USA to Tonga, to New Zealand to Australia. When my aunt picked me up from primary school, my friends asked, "Who is she?" "She's my mother." The very next day, another aunt would be at the school gate. Once again, my curious friends ask, "Who is she?" "She's my mother." The puzzled look on their faces screamed, "But you had a different mom yesterday." My grandparents never hid who my biological parents were. I mean, growing up, I knew who my mother was, but I didn't know her. Often wondering, what if my mother's family were also a part of my everyday life? Would I still be the same person? What if... At 11, I ride with my Samoan mother in her big white van in San Francisco. We are driving down to the VA hospital where she works. We listen to a Samoan love song on the radio. I am quiet, so is she. But it's a comfortable silence. It feels good to be with her. At 16, I returned to Tonga, where it all began. After Sydney's Darling Harbour, Auckland's Sky Tower, and San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. After traffic and people and concrete and big cars. I like walking on the unpaved back road to the Chinese store to buy my box of Anchor milk. I know the number of steps to the church. I recognize the brown cow, the smell of grass, and the fresh air blowing through my hair. It's home. Finally, that question, who am I, has an answer. I am Meleana. I live in Nukunuku. I have 4 mothers, 2 fathers, and 3 sets of grandparents, and I'm happy with that.
Okay, so that gives you a little bit of feel for the what those stories can look like, and not sort of high tech, clearly, but quite powerful anyway. Now this is another one. I'm going to skip over this because I'm running out of time now. I do think reflection's good for well-being. You know, trying to make sense of what's happened to us, being proud of what worked, thinking about what didn't, how we can improve that, just having some time to make sense of things. But that's quite a good video. It's only about a minute long, but and digital storytelling is used quite often in these contexts that I mentioned here, like social work, education, internships, and so forth, where students are reflecting on some placement or some experience they had and making some sense of it. So now I've done some of this now. When I talked about this a couple of years ago, I hadn't actually done any digital storytelling yet, but I have now a couple times. I'll give you some more details. It involves me approaching lecturers, seeing if they're interested in doing this. So far, I've done embedded sessions, so much along the lines of what we do already for other kinds of literacies and skills. So human services, Masters of Education. On Friday, I'm going to be going to the Center for Entrepreneurship. So I teach the students basics about putting a story together, what that means, how to get the artifacts that you can use legally, facilitating those story circles, and showing them how to do the video editing. And I'll mention in a minute how that's gone, which is actually perfectly fine. So far, it's gone really well. All the people that I've worked with so far, and it's a small group, admittedly, they want to repeat next year, probably tweak it a little bit. They all are interested in doing some case studies on it. So there's a research interest there as well. Students seem to really like it. I don't have heaps of data, but what I've seen is very positive. Like they find it something fun, interesting to do. They get to be a bit creative. They have sort of a space to think deeply about what they're learning and figure out how to communicate that most effectively. So I think it is giving them that sense of a voice about it. So it's been very positive. Hard to get people to come to story circles because nobody likes group work. But if you put some marks to it, it's really quite helpful. So that's just something to bear in mind. Really not issues with technology. Like I've sort of made demonstration videos and so forth. Not that many have watched it. Half people didn't use the kind of cloud-based editor that I presented to them. And they came up with something. Now I have to say there are expressions of people being freaked out before they start doing it, but it seems to actually work out okay so far. So my question to you is, because I really do want some feedback on this, digital storytelling has been used in educational environments for around 20 years or so, really sort of since there's been the digital tools that have enabled it. But it's really been dependent on individual academics or maybe small groups of academics. And if they leave or they move on to some other project or whatever, then it disappears. What if learning advisors start to integrate this digital storytelling or some variation of it into what we do as sort of literacy developers, let's say? So we're already developing academic literacies with expository writing, as I've got here. We do more and more work with critical reflections. Would we want to add this somehow over time. And it doesn't have to be everyone, but I'm really quite curious to see what people have to say about that. Anybody have any thoughts? Should we throw you into breakouts for a minute, or any
Mal or Julie, I can comment there.
Hi, Georgie,
thanks.
how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for a fantastic presentation. I haven't considered that concept before. I love it. I think it's really worthwhile for so many students, like you've pointed out. I do think that in our learning advisor roles here at Aotearoa, we tend to have the most success when we are teaching those academic skills that are related to students' assessments. That's where we get the buy-in, and that's where we've had to put our resource just with competing demands. So if we can find areas where students are needing to use those same digital storytelling skills, and I think particularly in our creative industries, there's some definite match-ups, for example, broadcasting, video skills, etc. So yeah, thank you so much, and I'll definitely think on if we can integrate that into some of our classes where appropriate.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Georgie. And happy to be in touch with any of you with any level of interest at all. So that's great. Thank you.
Hi, Julie. This is Xiaodang from Victoria
Hi,
University.
How are you?
Hi. A very, very beautiful stories, examples that you showed us, and really love that. I was just wondering, for us, the usage is more that and our unit actually help with tutor training. And one of the things we talk about inclusive tutor training is about getting to know the students. The tutor is important for them to do that. And at our institution, academics are now encouraged to do a little video introduction of themselves. And I kind of wonder whether actually that's something I'm thinking that I will talk to our academic developers and talk about how they could make that a first task before courses starts, that get students to make a little video about themselves and share it on their course learning management platform. It will be good for them to get to know each other, and for the tutors, for the academics to know who the students are. It's fantastic. Yeah, quite beautiful. Cool. Yep.
No, thank you. And that it is used that way sometimes, and it does give a chance. And I think also the other thing I didn't really mention, like for students that might struggle to stand up in front of a room and say, "Hi, my name is so and so," and describe who they are and all that. This can give them an avenue to really think about it and do quite a purposeful introduction of how do they want to introduce who they are. So yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, cool.
Julie, can I ask a couple of questions? I know we work in the same place, so I could ask you tomorrow, but maybe these questions might be of interest to others as well. The first one is, with the students you worked with, how much what sort of opportunity or an uptake do they have in terms of actually like watching each other's videos? Do you notice the kind of the group community forming as well within the cohort?
Yeah. They just will probably see the videos at the end, and to do that kind of group screening, which I actually think is a really important part of it, to sort of see what, be able to show off their work, because they do tend to be quite proud of it too, that they did this thing, they made this cool little movie. So there is that sort of bit of cohort building. And I actually was talking to the education lecturer a couple of days ago about that too. Who's run it once now. She wants to actually build that with more meetings with the students to strengthen that even further, and not necessarily that being an integral part, and it probably wouldn't all be about the digital storytelling, but really working with that idea. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. The other question I had was just what you regard as digital literacies. Are you talking about just sort of how to make videos, like the technical side of things, or are there other sort of aspects of kind of crafting and creating narratives or something that's not purely technical?
It is both, and I kept the list quite short just for those questions, but there is the technical side. And, we know that lots of people, especially younger people, they know how to point their phone at something and make a video or whatnot, but to actually use a video editor and do that purposefully and gain confidence with that, just on the technical side, is important. But to also make a compelling story, you do need some other kind of skills that are more in the storytelling side, like if you do your voiceover, so how are you going to tell your story, what's the shape of the story, but also how do you blend that with a visual narrative, to make, and with the music as well. So you've kind of got the various channels to try and make those work together, and how do you access appropriate media that's legal, but also effective in the context, those kinds of things. So it kind of, the story aspect and the technical aspects blend together quite a lot. But I do think my sense so far from students is that they really enjoyed that part of it too, trying to get all the building blocks together to make it work effectively, because they want their story to work. They want it to communicate what they're trying to say.
Cool, thanks, Julie.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other thoughts? Comments? No? Cool.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Julie. That was really, really interesting. So, and quite moving, some of the stories, I think, as well. So, yeah, well, we've virtually come to the end of this presentation. Oh, I've had a comment. Yes, from, I'll see if I can get the chat up. Oh, yeah, that's from Sherry saying, great presentation, thank you. And Ziaden said thank you before she obviously had to duck out. So thank you again. That was really very good. I really enjoyed
thanks for
it.
coming along. Cool.
Yeah, totally. So don't forget, folks, the special interest group on this topic is in 1 minute. So if you just stay online, I'm sure we'll be able to have a chat about it all. So look forward to seeing you then. But if you have to go and have lunch, well, that's just fine.
Thanks, Mervyn, for doing
right. No worries.
facilitating.
No worries.
Cool.
Okay.